right, it is Film Study by the numbers. We're going to take a look back at week 2 with Ken McKusick and Dan Rees. Guys, welcome to the show.
How you doing, Josh?
I'm all good. Ready to see what type of numbers stood out to you guys this week.
All right, fantastic. New format. Dan, take us through the first number, and we'll go right to it.
All right, perfect. Sounds good. Let's jump right in. First number, 58.75%. That's the percent of games missed by the end of 2020 for Tavon Young. So that's 47 out of the possible 60 games that he could have played that he'll have missed due to injuries. It's really an unfortunate injury, taking him out for the rest of the year. It's really devastating for the team, devastating for him. It's real unfortunate. Tavon was drafted in 2016, and he's just had a number of injuries, taking him out a lot. And it'll be really kind of, I guess, interesting to see how they handle this challenge for sure.
Yeah, he's difficult to replace. We kind of went into that on the defensive pod. They have not made a move yet to replace him on the roster. I'm still interested to see what happens this week, but it may be they're looking for the street, the possibility of trade, and then probably the practice squad guys as a fallback because they have 2 of those. Let me move on. I'll give you 2 numbers, 4.4 and 8.4. The 4.4 is the yards per carry for Lamar on his 13 non-kneels in the game against the Texans. 8.4 yards per carry for the running backs. So the running backs really did a wonderful job this game of carrying the load and wore down the Texans as the game wore on. I think the Texans actually did a pretty good job. They overplayed Jackson to keep his zone reads in check, but that did leave the middle of the field more open.
Yeah, it was definitely lower than we've come accustomed to with Lamar. I think he ran for like 6.9 last year, so a big drop in this last week's performance. But let's see. All right, the next number, 18%. That's the 2020 target share for Miles Boykin. 19 targets out of the 50 pass attempts so far this year, 4 the first week and 5 this week. It's great to see Miles get involved this year, really increased role. Last year he had 5% for comparison. So last year he only had 22 targets out of 440 passes. So over three times as many pass targets this year. So that's really great to see him get involved. He's also catching the ball a lot more often, 7 for 9 this year compared to 13 for 22 last year. So it's really great to see his increased role.
So target rate is up, catch rate is up, and the other thing I really love is that he seems to be part of the extended play routine that Jackson is going through. He's had a couple catches on extended plays, either coming back to the ball or going to the right sideline when he almost always lines up on the left. Been very impressed with that, very happy with it. So big addition to the Ravens offense. 2 numbers on the next one are 0 and 27. 0, the number of base snaps that the Ravens played in week 2 after playing 20 in week 1 versus the Browns. 27, the number of nickel snaps they played against the Texans. This is fairly significant in the fact that the Ravens returned to some organizational roots in being able to stop the run with a nickel defense, and in particular, stop the run with 11 personnel against the nickel defense. And that's been very, very effective. And actually, instead of playing the base defense when the Texans did play 12 personnel, they went to another version of the nickel, the big nickel, where they put a third safety on the field instead of that third corner.
Yeah, it's definitely interesting to see the big switch from week 1. Unfortunately, Tavon Young comes into play again because he'd be that nickel back. So we'll see how that plays out. So, all right. The next stat I got is 51.6%. That's the percentage of snaps where there was motion at the snap in week 2 for the Ravens. This stat comes from Seth Walder over at ESPN. It's a new thing that they've been looking at is the motion at snap. So this isn't the motion before. This is when the player is actually moving at the snap. For comparison, the second highest is the Rams at 31.3%, and the Washington football team at 30% for third. So significantly higher for the Ravens than anyone else. And this is actually really important because we've seen, looking at past years, the impact that motion at the snap can have. It actually increases the EPA, or expected points added, by 0.08 per pass play and 0.11 per run play. So a pretty significant increase in kind of the success of the play by using the motion at snap. Lots of reasons that you can go into. Seth Walder had a really good article about it that I highly recommend people check out.
All right. One of the things I love is that the Ravens use their motion more for power with their tight ends. So they motion Boyle, motion Ricard a lot. You see them, lined up on the flank, and it's only a matter of Jackson starting the play, waving him in, getting the timing right, and they're hitting a double team, which is the kind of motion you're talking about, is the at snap motion, as opposed to pre-snap motion, where they move a receiver across to try and diagnose what the coverage might be. And that's the primary reason you try and do that. Snead has been an in-motion guy as well at the snap, and the Ravens use it very effectively, and I think you've underscored it there with that percentage. I'll move on. 10.3 and 5.3. 10.3, the number of air yards per completion in weeks 1 and 2, respectively, and 5.3 in week 2. A lot of this is a function of the defensive approach and the differences between the Browns and the Texans. The Browns were more interested in stacking the box, daring Lamar to throw, and were very banged up in the secondary. So even though they got pressure, Lamar beat them very effectively by going down the field. The Texans, on the other case, lay back in a lot of too deep coverages, which really means that a lot of the underneath passes, in fact, a jet toss to Hollywood and a couple of effective screen passes in this game were good choices, and thus the shorter air yards per completion.
Yeah, and I think I think this, along with some of your points earlier, kind of go along with what you talked about during the offensive podcast, and that really it's looking more and more like the Ravens offense is kind of making defenses pick their poison. And whatever they want to line up for, we'll go ahead and do the opposite. So that's great to see. All right, next number for me is 60.6%. That's the total DVOA for the Ravens through week 2. So DVOA is another really popular stat nowadays. It comes from Football Outsiders. It stands for Defense Adjusted Value Over Average. It breaks down each play and compares the performance to the league average based on the situation. So you get kind of like adjusted for who they're playing against and what sort of situations they were going in. So 60.6% total DVOA for the Ravens, which is first in the league by a large margin. Again, second is Seattle with 34.1%, so nearly double for the Ravens. Offense, the Ravens were fifth with 23.3%. Defense, they were third with 31.1%, and special teams, they were third with 6.2%. So really, not only are they first overall, they're in the top 5 in all 3 categories. So really showing that they're playing well so far this year.
And just to be clear there, DVOA, as I would term it, has it's a plus minus stat. So it normalizes to 0 for all teams in the league at some point once the normalization basis becomes the current season.
Great point. Yep. Showing how far they are from normal. So
yeah, a little twice as far as we thought, right?
Yep.
Okay, so the next one I have is 8.10, 7.52, and 6.35. Those are the adjusted interceptions per 16 games for Marcus Peters, Ed Reed, and Asante Samuel, respectively, the 3 highest in NFL history with 50-plus games played. So we talk about it occasionally on the show that Marcus Peters is the greatest interceptor of all time. That's heretical talk in this town, where Ed Reed is an icon. But the fact of the matter is that Marcus Peters, so far in his career, is slightly ahead of Ed Reed in terms of his adjusted interceptions. It's adjusted to the average rate of interceptions per game that's occurred relative to the historical norms from 1945 to 2020. So I thought that was one of the most interesting things I've seen in a long time. And Marcus Peters may or may not be able to hold off for his entire career with 7.52 or higher. But he, Reed, and Samuel are in a completely different league from everybody else who's ever played the game. So, the other guys are all in the fives and whatnot. So it's a very sharp drop off, a very long tail at the top end of that adjusted interception list.
Ravens fans got to consider themselves lucky getting to see two of them. That's pretty awesome. We'll see how it keeps up. Like you said, it likely gets harder as you get older, but it's great to watch him now. So, all right, my next stat is negative 0.26. This is a follow-up from last week's looking ahead stat, and is talking about Houston's average EPA on runs in week 2. So on last week's show, we talked about my looking ahead stat was regarding how well Houston did in week 1 on EPAs for runs. They ran for 0.31 EPA against Kansas City. So compare that positive 0.31 in week 1 to negative 0.26. So again, that's expected points added, which is the change in expected points caused by the play. Just for reference, the league average on run plays through 2 weeks is negative 0.04. So, between 6 and 7 times as negative of impact as league average. So a real solid job by the Ravens defense stopping Houston's run, which was really important. Just way to limit the Houston offense. And as you said, doing that with nickel defense is just pretty awesome job.
Yeah, I think pretty impressive. Now, there's some things to unpack there because I think it's pretty cool that in week 1 they averaged 0.31 EPA per play. Now, you mentioned the league average is negative per play per run, and they were way above that versus Kansas City, the Ravens' next opponent.
Yeah.
So it's really nice to know that you got a team that's having some trouble against the run. It's kind of a look ahead stat, and we can appreciate that going forward. But also that very few teams other than the Ravens actually run for a positive EPA per expected point added per play on run plays.
Exactly. Yep. All those are spot on. And this was for all plays. So all win percentages were included, but it really was kind of negligible because Houston didn't really run much out once the game got kind of a little bit out of control. So it was pretty much the same no matter how you looked at it.
All right. Got a fun one for the final 13. And that's the number of Ravens consecutive regular season wins without ever trailing in the second half. It is the longest such streak in NFL history. There are 2 longer streaks with ties that were mentioned during the broadcast. I want to get into them for a second, but the longest other win streak is 12 by the Bears in the 30s. The 1920 to 21 Akron Pros went 19 consecutive games with going 15-0-4 in those games and without ever trailing in the second half. The 29 to 30 Packers had a tie in their 8th game as well. So this is a historic run that the Ravens are on, and we've come to kind of expect what we see now week after week. I was a Jones era Colts fan. I grew up always expecting great offense. Obviously a 2000 Ravens fan and always expected great defense. But this is so special. You cannot expect this to be continued for very long. In fact, there's a pretty good chance I think that Monday night is the end of this streak.
Yeah, you better knock on wood after talking about a streak like that. So better not have jinxed it. So, but yeah, it's been awesome to watch, and hope it keeps going. So.
All right, outstanding, Dan. Appreciate you doing with this. We're trying to provide some pithier material. Anything you need to plug, or your at least your Twitter handle here before we go?
Yeah, just reach out to me or follow me on Twitter. It's DPREES and then the number 8. Just follow me on Twitter or reach out for whatever Ravens discussions you want to talk about.
Standing. And we'll have another such episode as a preview to the Monday night game. Probably will be out on Sunday night in advance of that Monday Chiefs game, because we know we have some big numbers coming into that. Look forward to that, and we'll talk to you next time on Film Study.